Is there a super easy way to open up your fretboard, not only for new chord voicings, but for super useful arpeggios? There is, and it's called triads. Today we're going to cover the three types of triads: major, minor, and diminished, and how each one appears in root position, first inversion, and second inversion across strings 1, 2, and 3. By the end of this lesson, you'll not only understand these triad shapes, but you'll know how to use them for both rhythm playing and melodic soloing. Today's video is brought to you by my brand new guitar course, The Musical Way to Solo, where we cover how to better use the best scale shapes and arpeggios for soloing. This course makes it incredibly simple to solo melodically and accomplish that in a very short time. The link is in the description down below. Let's get back to the lesson. What is a triad? Now, a triad is simply a three-note chord built from the root, third, and fifth of a scale. In this case, we're using a major scale. A major scale is made up of 7 different notes. All chords in major keys are created by harmonizing these notes of the major scale. You do this by simply skipping notes in the scale, otherwise known as stacking thirds. For example, in C major, the notes of the first chord are C, and we skip over the D and go to E. Then you skip from the E to the G. That is your major triad, C, E, G. If you begin on the D, you would end up with D, F, and A by skipping thirds or stacking thirds, which is the D minor triad. If you continue to the E and stack thirds, we would get E, G, and B, and that is your E minor triad. You can continue to do this to figure out the triads in your major key. In every major key, they always end up being major, minor, minor, major, major, minor, and diminished. So in every major key, you'll need to know how to play a major triad, a minor triad, and a diminished triad. On guitar, we can arrange those 3 notes in different orders on the fretboard, and that's what we call inversions. Let's begin with root position triads, which means the lowest note in the triad is going to be the root. Let's start with C major in root position. On strings 1 through 3, that's C on the 3rd string, 5th fret, E on the 2nd string, 5th fret, and then G on the 3rd fret of the 1st string. Now for the minor triad, we'll take that middle note, so this E right here, and lower it to E flat. So that gives us C, E flat, G. That's the C minor triad. For the diminish, we're going to take the 5th of the chord, so this note here, the G, and we're going to flat that. So that would be spelled C, E flat, and then G flat. Now for a practical tip, use these shapes as mini chords when playing rhythm parts. They cut through the mix beautifully when you, instead of playing like a C chord like this, and an F, and a G, I can then play this, C, F, and G. Back to C. Now as you can see, they work, but I had to jump around quite a bit, so it's still not that practical. But that's where inversions help us. So let's look at first inversion triads. A first inversion triad begins on the 3rd of the chord. So for the C major chord, we're going to begin on E. We'll put it here on the 3rd string, 9th fret. And then we play the G on the 8th fret and the C on the 8th fret. That's C major. To make it minor, I simply take the 3rd and flat it down to the 8th fret. So now I'm playing E flat, G, C for C minor. Then to make it C diminished, I'll take the 5th, which is here, and flat that down to G flat. And now I'm playing E flat, G flat, C, C diminished. So keep in mind as you practice these inversions, that lowest note is telling you which inversion you're using, whether it's going to be the root, the 3rd, or the 5th of the chord. First inversions can many times sound smoother when you're moving between chords, so these inversions are quite nice to use and experiment with. Lastly, let's look at second inversion triads. For these, we begin on the 5th of the triad. So for a C major chord, that means we're going to begin on the G. I'll put it here on the 12th fret. and then I'm going to play the C, and then the E. That would be my major triad. And the fifth of the chord, the G, is my lowest note in this inversion. To make it minor, I'll have to take the third, which is here, and lower it a half step to E flat. You'll recognize that as kind of the D minor shaped chord that we would use down here. So that gives us G, C, E flat. To make it diminished, I'm going to flat the fifth down to G flat. And now I have G flat, C, E flat. Now remember how it was a bit difficult to play those triads when I just used the root positions like this? That was tough to jump around and play those. Well, now let me play the same chords, but using some inversions. So I'll play C major here, but instead of jumping up and playing an F up there, why don't I play the F here? And then the G right here. So same chords. Less jumping around with that. I could also put the F right here and the G right here with first inversion chords. So let me try that. C, F, G. This demonstrates the importance of knowing these inversions so more chords are right in the vicinity for you to play. Now another way you can work on these chords is to play through this sort of an exercise. You play through all three inversions of a C major triad up the neck, for instance. So I'll begin on the root. That's a root position, C major triad. Then I go to the first inversion. And then I go to the second inversion. Those are all C major triads. I could do the same thing with C minor. Root position, first inversion, second inversion. All C minor triads. So I can do the same thing with diminished, of course. Root position, first inversion, second inversion. By doing this, you're going to hear how these shapes sound and work together, and that's part of how the pros navigate the neck so effortlessly. And here's another great use for these triads. It's not just for comping chords. If you pick the notes one at a time, they become arpeggios, which of course is the building block of melodic soloing. So instead of running up and down scales when you solo, try outlining a chord with a triad arpeggio. So take, for instance, I'm playing over a backing track that has C major and maybe A minor. So when those chords combine the backing track, I can arpeggiate the notes of C major, and then when it hits A minor, do the same thing. And that way, I'm hitting the chord tones of the chords in the track, as opposed to maybe just playing a C major pentatonic over it, which will work, but it's easier to target the chord tones by using these triads. You'll instantly sound more melodic and connected to the harmony. And make it a point to figure out at least one or two of the chords in something that you're going to solo over. And that way you can target one of these triads for your solos. You'll start hearing how solos and rhythm parts are actually two sides of the same coin. And this is actually part of what I cover in my new guitar course about soloing, because you don't have to be a pro-level player to sound super melodic. It's just a matter of applying a couple of basic principles of harmony, and your notes will sing and sound great. And notes that sound great will always sound better than just a ton of notes that have no real connection to the chords that you're soloing over. So to recap, each chord type in a major key, major, minor, and diminished, has three inversions that you can use on these strings. Now today we've simply covered on the first three strings, but you can do them on other strings as well. So each of these chord types are going to have inversions that you can use across the fretboard. They work beautifully for rhythm playing and melodic soloing. So start small and learn how to connect these. Only use maybe one triad at a time when you're soloing, and then stick to your pentatonic, for the rest of your solo. And speaking of which, when you combine these triads with really useful scales, the results can be really liberating for creating melodic solos. I recently made a video about what I think is the most useful pentatonic shape for soloing, and you can view that right here.